All right, let's get right into it. Picture this. It's early 2026 and a massive geopolitical crisis is brewing. The president makes a shocking threat to annex Greenland, and just like that, this obscure part of the Constitution, the 25th Amendment, is suddenly all anyone can talk about. The calls to use it are coming fast and furious, and they're coming from the very top.
I mean, you had lawmakers like Representative Sidney Comlager-Dove who were not holding back at all. They saw the president's actions as so unpredictable, so outright dangerous, that they were ready to pull the ultimate emergency brake in the constitutional system.
But all this intense political heat raises a huge question. Is this kind of situation what the 25th Amendment was even made for? To figure that out, we've got to tune out the noise, move past the headlines, and actually dig into the constitutional nitty-gritty. So first things first, let's look at the evidence that's really at the center of this whole debate, the president's health. Because for years, it feels like we've been told two completely different stories. And figuring out which one is real is absolutely key here.
And this is where things get really interesting. Look at the difference here. On one hand, you've got the official White House line from 2025, exceptional health, a cardiac age 14 years younger. Sounds great, right? But then on the other hand, you have what came out only because people could literally see it. He was diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency. That's a circulatory issue, but only after the swelling in his legs became obvious to reporters. And we only learned he was on a daily aspirin regimen, which is often used to lower stroke risk because of visible bruising. So it's a real clash between the official story and what we can observe.
The same split happens when we talk about his cognitive state. The administration's big defense is that he got a perfect score on something called the MoCA test. But here's the thing. Neuropsychiatrists will tell you that's just a 10-minute screening for basic memory. It doesn't test the complex, high-level thinking, judgment, planning, impulse control that you absolutely need to be president. At the same time, linguists are looking at his spontaneous speech and seeing, a pretty significant structural decline, with thoughts that go off on tangents and are just less coherent overall.
And the president? He actually has his own name for this rambling, nonlinear way of speaking. He calls it the weave. He says it's a deliberate choice, a way to make his speeches more exciting and to connect with the audience, rather than just robotically reading a teleprompter.
But when clinicians look at the weave, they see something totally different. Let's take a few examples from 2025. In the middle of a meeting with foreign diplomats, he suddenly goes off on this tangent about windmills killing whales. In a war cabinet meeting, he apparently spent 15 minutes talking about the room's decor. And then there's the famous Unabomber story, a completely impossible story chronologically, about his uncle teaching Ted Kaczynski at MIT. To a doctor, these don't look like a rhetorical strategy. They look like potential signs of cognitive issues, like problems with focus and memory.
So you might be asking, why is it so hard to just get a straight, objective answer about the president's health? Well, a huge part of the problem is a quiet, systematic war on the very government agencies that are supposed to give us that data.
Just think about this number for a second. 10,000. That's roughly how many scientific jobs have been cut from federal health agencies because of mass layoffs. I mean, that's a staggering loss of expertise and institutional knowledge.
Yeah, it was all done under this banner of Make America Healthy Again, or MHA. The new administration at Health and Human Services came in and just cleaned house. The top directors of the NIH, the FDA, and the CDC fired. They slashed mandatory tracking for foodborne illnesses down to just 2 pathogens, which basically blinds us to new outbreaks. And they even told the CDC to back off its official position that vaccines don't cause autism. What you're seeing is a deliberate erosion of trust in the very institutions we rely on for medical facts.
And this creates a really strange paradox. At the very same time the administration is blowing up transparent public health reporting, it's also pushing to gather up individual citizens' health data and pool it with private tech giants like Google and Amazon. It just makes it almost impossible for anyone on the outside to independently check what the White House is saying about anything, including the president's own health.
Okay, so we've looked at the confusing evidence and the difficulty of getting clear answers. So now let's pivot and look at the law itself. What was the 25th Amendment actually built to do?
This amendment didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was born from some serious historical crises. Back in 1881, President Garfield was in a coma for 79 days. Then in 1919, President Wilson had a debilitating stroke. In both of those cases, the country was just stuck. Power couldn't be transferred and everything was in a state of constitutional paralysis. The 25th Amendment, which finally passed in 1967 after JFK's assassination, was meant to make sure that never happened again.
Now, the part everyone talks about, Section 4, the involuntary removal, is designed to be really, really difficult. It starts when the vice president and a majority of the cabinet say the president is unable.
The VP immediately takes over. But wait, it's not that simple. The president can just write a letter saying, "Nope, I'm fine," and he gets his power back. If the VP and cabinet still disagree, they have to object again within 4 days, and then the whole thing goes to Congress. You can see it's built with tons of off-ramps and high hurdles.
And for Congress to make the removal permanent, they need a 2/3 supermajority vote in both chambers. And it all comes down to a single word, unable. And the people who wrote this were incredibly clear about what that means. Unable is not about being unfit or incompetent or making dangerous decisions. It means a deep, undeniable clinical problem. Think President Garfield in a coma. It's for a president who physically or mentally cannot perform the duties of the office.
So let's bring it all together. Let's take that really strict legal definition and apply it to what was happening in 2026. Does the president's behavior, no matter how alarming you might find it, actually clear that constitutional bar of being unable?
You know, we actually have a pretty powerful precedent for this. Think back to January 2021, right after the Capitol attack. Vice President Mike Pence was formally asked by Congress to invoke the 25th, and he refused. He argued that the amendment is for medical disability, not a tool to punish a president for his actions, or to be used for, in his words, political games. If it wasn't used then, it's hard to see how it would be used now over a foreign policy dispute.
And then there's just the raw politics of it. That 2/3 supermajority you need in the House and the Senate, that is an incredibly high bar. In fact, it's the exact same vote you need to convict and remove a president in an impeachment trial. That tells you everything you need to know. It was meant to be the absolute last resort, something that would require a massive consensus from both parties.
So here's the bottom line. The Constitution really gives us two different tools for two very different kinds of problems. The 25th Amendment is based on a clinical judgment. It's designed for a president who physically cannot do the job. Impeachment, on the other hand, is a political judgment. It's for a president who should not do the job because of high crimes and misdemeanors. The president's behavior in 2026, the threats, the erratic speeches, that all falls squarely in the political box.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty unsettling question. Even if invoking the 25th is the wrong tool for the job, constitutionally speaking, the fact that so many people wanted to use it points to a real fear. If the 25th is strictly for a medical disaster, then what's the constitutional fix for a leader who isn't in a coma, who is conscious and talking, but is seen as dangerously incompetent? And that's a question the Constitution doesn't clearly answer.